Unspoiled Network podcast.
This is Spoil Me, covering Mage, Errant, Book 6, Tongue Eater, Chapters 5, 6, and 7. In these chapters, I really never thought about people just looting the place. And I guess I had an idea of what kind of person was at Skyhold. And my estimation was they were better than regular people. They're not. Welcome to Spoil Me. Welcome to the show, everyone. I am Natasha. Thank you so much to Dan for commissioning this episode. What's up, Dan? You guys, I feel really silly that this didn't occur to me, but I also have to use the Harry Potter defense. And y'all know that's just going to be, whenever you're covering something that is this similar in its big broad strokes, you have to do this comparison in your head. It's just impossible to ignore. And I was thinking about post-Battle of Hogwarts and how if anybody had been caught looting the place, it would have been dealt with in a way that was like really based on the how dare you, this is disrespectful kind of, you know, that energy, and that everybody would have been part of shaming that person. And the reason that I was thinking that is because I forgot that in the Battle of Hogwarts, basically a lot of the Slytherins are just like, let's just hand Harry over and be done with it, and then they get kicked out. So who is left behind during the battle are purely folks who are like, quote, good-hearted and on the right side, which really oversimplifies everything, which is really the essence of Harry Potter. I mean, it is. And this is like, what if the Slytherins were still there? And, you know, they did what they needed to do to win, but once everything was over, they were able to be left to their own devices. And what do you think they would get up to? And I have to admit, this does track. I know I'm getting ahead of myself here because we don't really get into this whole thing until chapters 6 and 7. I still have to talk about 5, but it really made me stop and think, because if I continue looking at everybody as though the mere fact that they are at Skyhold means that they're good people, I'm going to get snuck up on a lot. And while that may make for a fun reading experience, it's not really smart, and I try to be a little smart. So now that I'm remembering how not only more true to the world John Bierce is trying to be, but also Skyhold is enormous, which I think I frequently forget. It's basically a city. And I'm thinking along the lines of, like, you know, a couple of hundred people, which is a lot easier to get everybody on the same page working together when it's a small group like that. And now we're we're starting to divide into even bigger teams based on what's going on with Alustin, and folks are going to start considering their options. So yeah, this whole thing has just gone in a direction that I wasn't considering at all, because I was assigning like my viewpoint from Harry Potter to this world, which I continually do. And I can acknowledge that while I'm recording and, you know, make it plain that I'm like doing this for the sake of the critique of the work. But it's a different thing when that's happening without me really realizing it inside my brain as I'm reading. And I really need to keep an eye on that. So let's start at the start with chapter 5, And I said last episode how worried I was about Godric's rage issues. And I stand by it. He is leaning into a rage that he knows isn't good for him. And he knows he should be hanging out with his friends and seeking company and generally not isolating himself. He's aware. But he's not doing that. And I would love to be rational and be like, dude, just do what you know is good for you. But that would be profoundly dishonest on my part, because I can't tell you guys how many choices I make in one day that I think to myself, this is not a good choice. This isn't smart. This isn't healthy. This isn't long-term thinking. And I go ahead and I do it anyway. So as much as I want to be like, dude, you know better. Yeah, so? Like, literally, so what? It's so annoying that we are like this. It really is. Because so much of the time we treat bad choices as if it's like, well, you didn't really stop to consider, or you didn't know what repercussions there could be, or. But honestly, I would bet 85% minimum of the choices that we make despite knowing it's bad for us. You know, it is just truly an unfortunate aspect of human nature. I don't like it, and I wish I wasn't like this. I know that there are people out there who aren't, and I just want to know what that's like, to just like mostly do what's good for you. Wow. Can you imagine if you just like made choices all day that you knew were the smart, good choice? Literally, what would life look like? I have no concept of it. It's just an alien landscape. So anyway, there's a lot of people in the chat relating. Misty, I'm aware. I do, but I do not do. I'm aware, but I do not do. Should be a postcard, Ms. T. Put that in the Discord. MX Shard says, mood. Dan says, I call that the pizza urge. The pizza urge. So do you mean like, I'm going to get pizza even though I know that I should have like a big, beautiful salad with grilled chicken and whatever? I definitely get it. And the thing is that so much of the time, and this is the truly wild part, you guys, it's one thing to be like, oh, I know what would be good for me, and I'm not going to do that because the other option is much more fun. So I'm going to do the other option because of the fun, despite knowing it's not smart. But is that how it usually goes? Because I would assert what it is I know what would be good for me, but that requires 30% more effort than the other thing. The good thing for me would also be fun, and probably more fun than option A. But I'm still not going to do it. I love me a big, beautiful salad much more than a slice of Domino's pizza. I will be real with you guys. Genuinely, I mean it. But one of those takes almost no work and almost no time. And the other is a lot. And I'm gonna usually go with what's easier. Taking a lovely walk early in the morning has never felt like a bad decision. I always feel better. I enjoy myself. But I don't do it because it's getting up to dress and immediately go outside, like where people are. Anyway, I just really felt for him in this section, especially with how the anger has to be comforting, because it's one thing to have this mission. You find the letter, then what? You know, he is motivated here by a very specific goal that is giving him some direction, And when you're grieving, it's just a cliche to stay busy so you don't really think about it. And what's interesting about this goal, a lot of us, when we're trying to escape our emotions by taking on a project or going to work, it's a total and complete distraction from whatever grief we're experiencing. But what he's looking for is directly related to his father. And when he's done and gotten the letter back and reads it, it's going to be so much worse. You know, if after my dad died, I decided I was going to build a deck to completely distract myself, I would finish the deck and still want to distract myself. And so then I would be like, I'm going to add a pergola to it. I could continually go down that road and choose to like never deal with it. But if he's got this one thing and it's all about his dad and it's finite, and once he accomplishes the goal, the experience will be him reading the last words his father left for him. Good luck, my friend, because that's going to hit you like a fucking snowplow. I don't know how you avoid that. Like, it's just a completely understandable reaction that I feel like is going to backfire so spectacularly. And I am really worried, not only with the reaction after just finishing and you know, being done with the goal, but also, what if the letter is not what you were hoping for? Or I'm going to go ahead and guess that it's going to be like encouraging and comforting simply because of who Artur was. But like, what if it isn't? Or what if he doesn't find it? I don't even want to consider that option. I'm going to be real with you guys. That's just like low-key, not even going to act like that's possible. He's going to find it. That's it. So this whole thing is taking his life over. And every single moment he he doesn't even want to be eating. Like, anything that takes away from this search is causing him to be really resentful, which kind of spills over later in the meeting that they have, because he doesn't want to be here and he feels like he's being told, oh, I have a thing to talk about. And he's like, ugh, this could have been an email. So there's also this whole thing. Godric found it almost surreal the way fully trained battle mages were acting nervous around him, even some looking afraid of him when he accosted them about his father's apartments. A big part of him still just thought of himself as a kid, to no one to be worried about. It was getting harder and harder to lie about that, though. To lie to himself, I should say. It would be easier, safer, if he were just another apprentice. It would absolve him of so much responsibility. But he had fought too many battles, survived too many near-death experiences to believe that. He was a battle mage in truth. And I'm thinking, coming into his own. But he was, for all that, still just a weak reflection of his father. And I was just like, God damn it, Godric, no, baby, this isn't what I'm wanting for you. You're not a reflection of your father. Like, you have some things in common just because of your affinity, but it's not, you're just so different in so many ways. And I would argue with Godric because, it's understandable. His father was a fucking force of nature. It's understandable to compare himself to his dad in his magic. But I also feel like, Godric, you are missing the point. Artur was extraordinary as a person, and you are too. Like, that, the best parts of Artur were not his magic, and you are embodying those things, which is way, way harder. So I wish you could see that, my friend. So this whole thing, he's like desperate, not finding anything that even helps him like know what direction to look in. And he's feeling guilty about not helping Sabe, and even though she's offered to help, he has refused it. Talia had offered, The only other person who offered to help was Talia's brother Tristan, but Godric had sent him away. And I thought it was interesting that Hugh did not offer. Hugh has taken a really different, like, because he is also grieving, but he also doesn't really believe that Kanderon is dead. He's in a really weird place where he kind of has his own mission. Not yet, but he's gonna. So I feel like that's part of why he's not exactly dialed in here. There's a point later where they have like a group hug and he seems startled that it's happening because he's been like clocked out, you know? Sorry. Dan says, man, I felt that being 6'2" at 12 years old. Damn! Big boy Dan. I was a kid, but the size of a grown-ass man. Took getting used to have people think you were an adult at first. Talk about people thinking you're an adult at first. If you develop early as a woman, too. Whew, real weird. But yeah, this whole, like, he just feels like he's in such an awkward place, you know? So, let's see. They have this moment when he finds out that he has a deadline. Once Indris is healed, she's leaving with her children and my grandmother. So he's freaking out because he's going to have to go with them. And so he can only find this within a given time. My question is why he believes it's still in Skyhold. And the answer obviously is because if it's not, then you may as well just give up looking. It's the only way to go, really, if you want to take action in any way. But I'm not entirely sure about feeling... I have got to be honest, you guys. I am just so suspicious of Sabe's grandma. I feel like she has the letter. I don't know why. That doesn't really make any sense, you know? If we have this as a major plot point that the letter gets stolen and he goes, if somebody significant is going to have it. It's not just going to be some fucking random that we've never heard of before. I have to assume. So the only person that it makes sense for me to think it is or Alustin, maybe, I guess. But I feel like it's got to be a person that we know. And I don't know exactly why. I don't know. That's really all I'm going on here is the assumption that it's going to be relevant to the crowd we've met so far, because why wouldn't it, story-wise, you know? So they have a chat here, this like group meeting. And when I say group, I mean more than just our like 4 usual guys. 5, sorry, mackerel. They have like the people who had been sort of interning under Hugh. We've got, you know, Talia's brothers. We have got some folks that Sabe has been like growing closer to. And it surprised me initially that there were so many people here that were all involved. Eventually, somebody does ask the question of like, why are we here exactly? And it turns out it's because she's being given sort of a blank slate on who she wants to take along with her away from Skyhold. Because as far as they are concerned, most of the people like that are not part of our core group are either Talia's family or they're warlocks. And she points out that leaving warlocks behind to be used as bargaining chips in Skyhold during this, like, what's going to be, it is a power vacuum right now, and it's probably going to get kind of ugly, is a really bad choice. Now, yes, but also, if I'm operating under the assumption that her grandmother is not to be trusted, I'm also looking at the fact that she's taking all of the warlocks with her and making it like, oh, we're just making sure they're safe. Are you? Like, this lady is not making it a secret that she doesn't give a shit about other people. She's been very straightforward about that. And I really appreciated later on when Hugh gets in an argument with his friends about whether or not Kanderon is really dead, that he is extremely resentful of how much everybody like talks about not trusting the great powers, but then the minute that a great power tells them a thing, they immediately believe it. And I had a moment with that because, you know, as somebody who does often respect authority too much, I could see myself falling into that trap very easily. And it's compelling to me that Hugh is the only one that seems to be thinking that way. That's not to say that they don't all recognize that her grandmother is a great power, somebody not to, you know, fuck with. It's more that he seems to be able to back away from that and look at this big picture in a way that the others are taking for granted very much, that if we're on the same side, she can't be like wanting to screw us. They're just, even though they know that she's powerful, they're just really trusting the relationship between Sabe and Alinea. And I just think it's interesting that Hugh is the only one to sort of be able to like clearly see. And I can't help but wonder if that's like related to how bad his family was to him. That he is really somebody who grew up not trusting family. They treated him very badly. They used him and abused him. And everybody else here, like, you know, they grew up in a situation that was, at least they knew their family had their back, even if they had like difficulties. So I almost wonder if that's where some of this is coming from. That he's just learned earlier, people who are supposed to be on your side aren't necessarily, or at least not in the way you think of it. So yeah, this whole like her scooting away Sabe to Alinea's with all of the warlocks just feels like a real potential problem to me. And they talk also about like the direction of the war and where it's going. And Sabe tells them about this being called Iris Moon Eye, the blind astrologer. And she is a dragon. And she has some really wild abilities that are dealing with different types of light. And I am not sure exactly how all of this works. I'm assuming that a lot of it is like, you know, dealing with like UV light and whatnot. I don't know about like the descriptions of what she can do to enemies sound like the effects of radiation almost. And I don't really know if that makes sense, but it made it, I just sort of kept thinking about like the effects of a bomb, you know, and I am so relieved that she herself doesn't seem to be moving. She's apparently like got her students bustling about getting ready for something, but she herself is not going to plunge into this, which kind of good because that sounds like a real dangerous lady. She had lost her home, her family, and her eyesight when she was just a hatchling during one of the endless battles in the chaotic years after the fall of Ithos. She blamed and hated Kanderon for creating that chaos, but had no interest in seeking revenge. And I'm like, well, we'll see. But yeah, this is just like such a versatile type of affinity that is really scary. And she's also like a really good healer, which again, I'm like, is this about almost having X-ray vision? Like, I don't know physics at all. I don't know how this works. But yeah, Sabe says she is not moving, but she has a disproportionately huge number of archmages studying under her tutelage or working for her, a handful of which could easily enter the lower ranks of the great powers if they want it. With Sadapson and Starholt alone, Alustin has a terrifyingly effective strike force, and there's no chance he's done summoning up old allies. So, yeah, she then shares about how, like, grandmother's letting me take some people with me. And there's a little bit of like a cute back and forth between Venta's friend and Sabe, where they're both getting like really embarrassed and bashful, but Godric is in too cranky a mood to really appreciate it. Lucy said, we'll talk to the others, but no promises. And everybody files out, and Venta and Sabe have all kiss. Then it's the meeting of just our 5 friends, for you, Mackerel. And this is the moment where Godric kind of loses his temper, because Sabe repeats about how he's mustering old allies. And Godric is like, do you have anything that isn't a waste of time? And she sort of like, you know, gets hurt by that, which you would. And then he immediately looks so apologetic. And she finds out here about the ink affinity and is like, oh man, if literally anybody else developed an ink affinity, I would be like, genuinely, who cares? But this dude is the worst possible idea. Like, this is, who fucking knows what he could do with that? And yeah, he can like, there's so many ways he can use this. It's truly alarming, considering how much of magic is like glyphs, you know, things that are written here. And if he could get, his paper is already like dangerous as a physical item. The way that it can be compressed and cut, I don't mean the paper be cut, I mean the way it can cut is so scary already. But then you add being able to like toss any glyph on things, or anything you write can be changed in mid-battle, you know? You wouldn't even have to write exactly. You would be able to just literally pour ink and then use your magic to get all of that ink to transform into the same glyph at the same time and do it simultaneously to like 1,000,000 pages. This is very unsettling, and it hadn't really occurred to me until we got to this point. So, Talia also points this out. I liked this. It makes sense as that he's mustering old allies, as there's probably a bit of collective guilt for not coming to Hellocoat's aid before it was destroyed. And add that in with the fact that they all have plenty of other good reasons to want Havath destroyed, and they're going to be easiest for him to recruit. And I was like, I didn't really consider the guilt thing, but I have to imagine that does play some factor. And then they're like, well, what's another reason he would do this? There's other forces he could go to. And it really does seem like he's laser focused on old allies. So what do you think that's about? And Hugh is the one who's like, oh, he wants his revenge. They were supposed to have Hellocoat's back. They fucking didn't. And what he wants is to get them all out on the battlefield in a really vulnerable position and then fuck them over. Really fuck them. He wants to drive these people mad because they completely let him down. They allowed his entire nation to be leveled. Yeah, he wants to be an ally until he doesn't. And I love this so much, you guys. I love it. I love it. I love it. I love it. This did not enter my head at any point. I don't think it would have occurred to me, even if you like gave me a little bit of a hint. It should have. The level of rage that we know Alustin is feeling toward everybody who let him down. I mean, he's out here genuinely enjoying killing Havath, who had nothing to do with what happened to him, just because they are what they are, and that's enough for him. That it's like joyful and gleeful. He truly, it's like a hobby. That should have tipped me off to the splashover effect that kind of hatred can have. Nope. Didn't even think of it. Genuinely like, oh my God, this is, everybody is gonna be so fucked if he gets his way. He has really figured out a clever way to ensure that he exacts revenge on everybody. This is really an all-inclusive plan, and I'm impressed. It's horrifying, but I'm impressed. So, this is when, they're like, well, the thing is, because Talia says, we have your grandmother tell everyone he's planning to use the plague vials against them. And then, nobody's going to want to ally with him. And Sabe's like, it's not going to sound true, because if that were what he wanted to do, he could have just released the plagues in their cities, and it wouldn't have been, he wouldn't need to negotiate anything. He could just have a little sneak attack of whatever, and that's done. So because we came up with this very specific threat with the plague vials, it is kind of limiting the way that we can warn people, due to the fact that, like, this is the sort of weapon that normally would rely on stealth, and that's obviously not the path he's chosen. So it's just really not believable. So let's see. I'm trying to find oh, okay. So here's the point where we have both Sabe and Talia. Sabe's really the one that poses the question and is like, hey, guys, are you all comfortable going up against Alustin? Like, do any of you have some complicated feelings about this that you want to talk about? Because I've assumed we're all on the same page with, like, let's get back at this guy. But I'm not sure that's true. And Talia says, I'm not, like, awesome with it because he was our mentor, but he needs to be fucking stopped. And he almost killed Hugh, and he did kill Kanderon. So yeah, revenge for sure. And this is when Hugh chimes in with Kanderon's not dead. You heard what my grandmother said. I know it hurts, but you need to face the fact that Kanderon is... No, Hugh repeated. No to your grandmother. No to Kanderon being dead. And no, I don't want revenge. I never wanted revenge. I never wanted revenge against Rhodes. I just wanted him to leave me alone. I never wanted revenge against my family. I was just happy to be free of them, and don't think I never noticed you all fantasizing about revenge against them on my behalf. And I don't have the time or the interest in hunting down Alustin for revenge. Besides, my magic's not even working properly anymore, so it's not like I'm going to be any help stopping him from destroying the continent or whatever. Kanderon's still alive, and I don't care if anyone believes me. I'm going to find a way to help her. And he gets up and fucking leaves. And again, very frustrated with the fact that I know Sabe saw that sphere. She doesn't seem to be getting where he's coming from at all on this. Bizarre to me. And I'm assuming she saw it. Maybe there's like some weird possibility that sphere is invisible to everybody but Hugh. So he has this like really strong evidence, he thinks, and it's just not perceptible to anybody else. But I thought she saw it. I was pretty sure they like had a couple sentences back and forth about it. And it's just so weird to me that she's like not factoring that in at all. As for Talia and Godric, I don't know that Hugh told them about it. But if you're constantly like arguing that somebody is still alive and you don't actually tell them about this evidence, that's a weird choice to me. Why isn't Hugh explaining this? Like, I don't really get, at this point, it's been days, why he hasn't spoken up and been like, I know you guys all think I'm in denial, but I have a good reason for believing this thing. Again, though, maybe he feels like it wouldn't matter because Sabe did see it and she doesn't seem to believe him either. So I don't know. It's just really, really frustrating to me how nobody is like, this reminds me, do you guys remember in The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe? There is a point at the very beginning where Lucy Pevensey has gone to Narnia and come back, and she's trying to explain to all of them about the world in the back of the wardrobe, but when she opens it to show them, it's not there. And everybody assumes that she's made up a story for fun, and she's trying to be like it's serious, and they get a little bit frustrated with her because they think like she's refusing to admit that it's a fantasy. So they go to, I think his name is Professor Kirk in that book, and they're like, yo, what do we do? Our sister has kind of lost it, and she's insisting that this like fantasy world is there and it's not there. She's crazy. What do we do? And his response to them is she somebody that's made shit up before? And they're like, well, no, but our brother Edward said that they just played a game. And he's like, okay, is Edward somebody who would make shit up? And they're like, well, yeah, definitely. And he's like, seems kind of obvious here, kids. Like, just go with the person that you know tends to be the truth teller. That's very simple logic. Do they not teach this shit in schools anymore? What the fuck? And that's kind of where I'm at here. Hugh has never been the type to just indulge in a fantasy. That's just not who he is. And it's really annoying that nobody is stopping to consider that it's not to say that grief can't make you act out of character to a degree, but this is very specific and it bothers me. It's just bothering me. I'm just saying. So this is when we go to Hugh, and he has started like pounding down the hall, not even really clear where he's headed. And then he finally realizes that he is going to the Grand Library. And he gets there. The library was filled with an oppressive, watchful, smothering quiet, so thick you felt you were swimming in it. Hugh almost let Mackerel drag him out of the library right then and there. Even in the best of times, it was dangerous to be in the library. He didn't leave, though. There were mages floating above the index, dozens of them. Even more stood on the library balconies just above shifting clouds of blue crystal dust. Hugh took a few moments to understand what he was seeing. Some of the mages seemed to be lowering some sort of wrought iron ward into the blue cloud. Others poked at it with glowing enchanted rods, while others yet seemed to be measuring it with grids of light. Then clarity came all at once, and Hugh snarled. They were trying to break into Kanderon's lair. And this man almost just murders 30 people. Like, purely his magic not working is the only thing that, like, slows him down initially. And then he starts to look around and realize that he can, like, recognize a lot of these people. The assumption he'd made initially was that these are Havathi survivors and they're out here continuing their shit. And then he realizes these are our fucking people, and that's so much worse. And is genuinely like, all right, well, how do I get the library awake to completely wreck all of them? And then he takes a second and he takes a breath and he's like, oh my God, what the fuck was I about to do? Like, really has a moment of, I mean, yeah, I've killed people, but never just in cold blood like that. That is a completely different thing. Oh my God, I can't turn into that. I'm not doing it. And there's a bit of a, like, moment where he's remembering Amalda Vale and is thinking, I didn't kill her for revenge. And it seems to him like he's trying to convince himself. I don't think he did. I don't think it was, you know, it feels like a rationalization, but I just, sometimes sometimes that's like a trick our brains can play on us. So anyway, this is when he's like, all right, you know what I'm going to do? I am going to write a ward. And I'm not sure exactly if we find out how this ward works. But let's see. A few minutes of work later. Oh, this is for the attention ward, right? Blocking off a room-sized circle of the balcony. And he's able to use mana to, this is the same thing that he used to do, which was because he couldn't control his magic in the normal way, he relied on wards. So he's kind of going back to that here, which I think is really interesting and potentially going to open up some new doors for him, because sometimes getting options taken away forces you to be really creative. So let's see. Hugh didn't have any leather of the type he preferred in his storage tattoo, but he did have some cloth and cord, and he quickly assembled a sling to use for his explosive ward stones. So he's got some things set up, and basically what this is all serving to do is create a series of distractions so that he can go in there and do what he needs to do. And there's people walking past him. I love that he creates a sort of like a headband that the enchantment on it just makes people think that he is a familiar face that's supposed to be there. And I really like the creativity of that. He isn't making himself look like a specific person. That's tricky. He is just making himself somebody that is accepted in the circumstance, and that's all. And there's like such a simplicity to that is really elegant. I liked it. So he cut a sound ward onto the soles of his force boots. His force boots had self-repair enchantments, so the sound ward would only last a few hours at most before it healed up, but it was safe enough cutting into the sole. Putting the actual spell forms of an enchantment into the soles of enchanted shoes was a horrendous idea, given how much damage soles tended to take. And he finishes this and considers for a moment asking for his friend's help. And he doesn't feel comfortable doing it. And this is what broke my heart the most, you guys. Like, it's weird how emotional this made me. This is such a big deal that they don't believe him and aren't talking to him, that he goes into a pretty hairy situation not feeling like he's allowed to ask for their help, because they're just going to try and argue with him again. I really hate that for him. It's a bad enough thing to be going through this kind of grief anyway, but you're going through the grief of losing Kanderon, at least for the time being, and the grief of people that you're close to not believing you and thinking that you're just letting your emotions get in the way of reality. And that is so discouraging and isolating. It bummed me out so much. It really did. So then we go to chapter 7, down in the stacks, and he's talking to the index note again, and it's still in pain. And it says, Mage is just annoyance. Alone hurts. Think by self hurts. And it sounds like the connection that it had with Kanderon was really important to sustaining it. And the fact that she's gone has fucked it up. So it's asking Hugh to distract it by giving it something to do. And it turns out what he's asking for as well, these golems lead you to where the books are, but it's going to be like Google Maps, where it takes you the most direct route. And he's like, I need a route that I can walk and take public transportation for. Can you help me with that? And I don't know if anybody listening to this is unaware, if you live in a place that does public transportation, but there's a public transport option on Google that is so good that I used to use when I lived in Philadelphia, and it knew all of the bus schedules and all of the train schedules, and you would just put in where you wanted to go, and it would time everything for you. It was really good. So anyway, he wants that. And the index node is like, awesome. This will take me more time to figure out, which will be more distraction, which is exactly what I need. Perfect. So he asks for books on the underlying theory of warlock pacts, ways warlock pacts break, attacking and defending warlock pacts, what happens when you have too many clauses in a warlock pact, and repairing warlock pacts. And I am so curious what he's thinking here with this, because I thought he was going to look up stuff like preservation magic, like trying to figure out what the sphere itself was. I thought it was going to go in the direction of like, is there a precedent for this thing that she's left behind that could help me understand? Instead, he's looking for stuff specific to their pact. And I am not really sure what it is he's expecting or hoping to find. Like, the only thing that I could sort of think up here was that because Alustin used his pact against Kanderon, that maybe there's a way to undo what was done to her because it was through the pact that way. And I'm not even sure if that makes sense. So I'm just really curious, like, where we're going with this. And it's an interesting thing because collecting all these books, despite the fact that this golem is leading the way, the library is really messed up without Kanderon post battle. And he is having a bit of a time navigating his way through this. The flying grimoires weren't moving like they normally did. Instead of soaring through the air in great flocks, coasting between thermals in the massive internal space, they were making short, darting flights between adjacent shelves as though hiding from some aerial bibliovorous predator. It's fine. Several times they almost slammed into Hugh. He managed to dodge most of the time, and Mackerel knocked the rest out of the air and away from him. He didn't think any of them had flown at him deliberately. Several of them had even tried to swerve away from him. It was just a product of the strange feral mood of the library. And that was really interesting to me, that they're just kind of like operating without a goal here and moving in random directions. Then there's this thing, this was a spooky thing. I'm trying to find the spot here. Right. So it happens during the descent. His descent took nearly 3 hours. It would only have taken a few minutes if he'd been able to take one of the library's levitating cobblestone platforms down. It would have taken at most an hour if he'd been able to take the major staircases down. Both of those were far too exposed, however, and Hugh wasn't about to let the vultures use him to try and break into Kanderon's lair. So he's having to occasionally literally climb down over bookshelves and just hope the library isn't pissed at him for it. This part, you guys. Once, as Hugh was navigating a series of aisles lit only by dimly glowing book titles, he turned a corner to spot the uniform of a Havathi sacred swordsman lying folded on the floor, perfectly clean and unwrinkled. The aisle it lay in the center of was pitch dark, save for the glowing patch of light around the uniform. I don't know about you guys, but I desperately want to know what the fuck that was. Because that sounds like a horror movie. What the fuck is that? Genuinely. What the fuck? I don't know. I feel like it's almost the sort of thing that it's better to not know. There's a sinister something that if you tried to really make that crystallize into an idea, it would sort of lose the ominous quality. So I think it's best for it to go this way. But I also have to imagine John Beers had a thing in mind when he set this up. And I really want to know what it was. That's so creepy. Another time, Hugh was forced to use one of his pre-made defensive wards to protect himself from being cut to ribbons by a cloud of flying paper scraps. Several times, Hugh found himself clambering down the sides of bizarre, malformed, twisted bookshelves that looked like nothing so much as cancerous growths coming out of the library itself. The farther away from the immense central shaft he traveled, the more often he found the growths. Now, I was thinking that these growths were like encasements around the bodies of the Havathi that Alustin killed. But at one point, he describes a lump as being almost the size of Kanderon herself. And I was like, that's not, or no, half again the size of Indris. That feels too big. So I think it may just actually be sort of growths going wrong because of the, but I did think, especially because of the reference to the uniform still being there, that it was, where the body's going to go exactly in this space. And maybe that's what happened to them. And this is also a neat one. One of the bookshelf tumors, so far back within the stacks that no hint of the central shaft's light reached it, was half again the size of Indris. Hundreds of books flew around it, and there was something about the way they moved that seemed off to Hugh. None of the jerking, corkscrewing flight of normal grimoires. Instead, these moved in oddly precise, spiraling flights, like twisting constellations in flight. Books darted in and out of the tumor's twisted shelves in endless streams, departing and rejoining the constellation flights. And this moment, he sees it, and immediately both Mackerel and the origami golem recoil and flee and drag him away. And when he tries to find out what scared them, they won't talk to him about it. Once again. What the fuck? Like, this just feels very specific. I really believe John Bierce had something in mind when he wrote this, and I want to know what it is. And I don't know if we're ever going to find out. We don't have to. In fact, it's probably best if you don't. But if I were going to interview him, I would ask about these scenes and be like, do you remember what you were kind of going with here? Because I want to know. So the rest of the books I'm looking for are on these bottom floors, and it says no to Kanderon's lair. And he says, can you get me past the crystal cloud? And it says, yup. And what we have next is him having to sneak around the other mages. And there's a conversation going on where two of them are like, I don't get why everybody is overreacting to this dumb book storage place. It's not alive. It doesn't know anything. It's not itself vicious. There's some dangerous stuff, but the books aren't scary. To which I am genuinely, sir, are you living on the same plane of existence as everyone else? What do you mean? And I have to assume that he's on main stairways and stuff and he's not seeing the crazy shit that Hugh is running into. But also dudes. And there's one other voice who's like, guys, people die in here a fucking lot. A lot. And he's like, yeah, idiots, assholes. Yeah, they die in here a lot. It's not a big deal if you're just fucking not bad at being a wizard. And Hugh is just thinking to himself, well, I know who's probably going to die if shit goes bad. Hugh was considering possible distractions when he bumped a nearby tome with his elbow. The book erupted off the shelf in surprise, diving down to the floor below. Below him, he heard cursing and shouts of surprise. Hugh smiled at that, then retreated deep into the stacks again and set to work. And I was like, it's really lucky for you, Hugh, that it just dives down and not that it just made noise and fluttered around so that they looked up and saw you right away. That would really suck. So this is when the explosions begin to go off, and they're not meant to be destructive. It's just pure distraction once again. And let's see, for all their bravado, most of the thieves in the library had been in the shelters during the battle, and a few of the others had witnessed Kanderon in action, having been stationed deeper in the mountain. Those who had witnessed her fight almost universally refused to join them, which had left quite a few of the vultures uneasy. The weird behavior of the library had unsettled them even more over the past few days. That unease erupted into panic when a series of explosions went off on one of the levels of the library. And it's mentioned they don't know that these explosions are harmless, and the books also don't know, and they get very upset. No one noticed in the resulting chaos a paper golem dive down into the index's protective cloud and open a hole behind it. Nor did they notice Hugh of Emblyn dive into that hole after it, his fall guided by a green spellbook slung over his shoulder. And they certainly didn't see the hole close up again. They were too busy dodging books and shouting in confusion. And to add insult to injury, it says if they had just been chill and hunkered down, they would have been okay. But because one of them attacks a book directly and turns it into confetti, the books react very poorly to this, and his friends try to save him. Things escalated quickly from there. A few minutes later, the library was quiet again. Only a few piles of magical equipment and a few suspicious stains remained to speak of the attempt to break into Kanderon's lair. The Index, despite its pain and confusion, decided that it would be for the best if Hugh never learned about their fate. Oof. Like, I kind of do want Hugh to know, just for my own satisfaction of like seeing his reaction, but I also know this would haunt him for the rest of his life. So probably, and the fact that it's making these decisions that it's best for him not to know, like that feels very Kanderon-y. Kanderoni, the Skyhold secret treat. I just don't really, this is one of those things that it's not really like I genuinely want him to write Hugh finding out. It's more like I want a choose your own adventure where you can flip to the page where he finds out and see how it would go. And then you can just like go back and choose the one where he doesn't find out, because you know that that's for the best. But you also do just have some curiosity about the way it would turn, you know. So that's the end of chapter 7. Guys, what is he going to find out? I'm so curious what he thinks is going on. Like, I don't know. I just really hate the fact that after the bond he has created with his friends, he is in a place now where he does not feel like he can trust them to have his back with this. You know, it really makes me sad, and I hope that they get over this soon. I don't want the whole book to be them not believing him. So I just really want them to either stop and be like, maybe we should consider differently, or for him to have a direct conversation and be like, this is why I think this. So MX Shard says, me quick saving before choices in video games. That is a really good analogy. Exactly. I love the fact that video games didn't even occur to me, even though that is a much better shorthand. I'm thinking of choose your own adventure books from when I was like 8 years old. I'm just an analog chick, I guess. All right, guys. Well, thank you all so much for listening, for hanging out with me. Thank you again to Dan for commissioning this. Really enjoying it. And also, Dan, correct me if I'm wrong, but I feel like this section you slowed down a little bit on how much you're having me cover each time. And it really is allowing me a little bit more room to like stretch and, explore different tangents without feeling too pressed. So I think this is working out well. All right, guys. Appreciate you. Until next time. Toodaloo, motherfuckers.
That was an Unspoiled Network podcast.